First Sergeant Kep here with Company D, 2nd United States Sharpshooters, and we are back in the shop again to talk about an item of Civil War reenacting that is incredibly ubiquitous, yet given very little attention, and that is the humble rope. Now, in the 19th century, rope was something that was generally of higher quality. It was something people that looked after, they cared for, because rope back then wasn't as consumable or disposable as it is now. But it's such a key part of our hobby as much as it was a necessary part of military life during the Civil War. So I have just a handful of shop projects that I wanted to get around to after our last event. And this was one that I wanted to talk about because rope care and maintenance is surprisingly hard to find in any sort of condensed space. So I thought I'd share my favorite tips and tricks to make sure that your rope lasts a long time, that it is pleasurable to use, and it also kind of looks like you know what you're doing, because a lot of reenacting for us isn't so much, you know, did I buy the cheapest uniform and can I march on the field and burn powder? A lot of us, we really want to understand what life was like back then. And part of that is understanding the knowledge and practices that were commonplace then that very few people in the modern era still hang on to. So when it comes to rope, after our last event, I had the ropes for my dog tent, which is mostly what I use these days. And so I have a front and rear guy line. It's a little bit longer, which is right here. And then I have a series of uprights on each of the corners to raise my dog tent up off the ground a little bit. Makes it a little taller, makes it a little bit bigger, and you get some really great airflow during the summer. We did a video on dog tent setups years ago. If you want to learn more about creative ways to set up your dog tents, go check that one out. And so what I did is I took those ropes and I stuck them in a bucket with some laundry soap, put in some cold water, and I just agitated. I just hand washed my ropes for, I don't know, I let them soak because I hadn't done it in years. So probably about 15, 20 minutes. Every once in a while I'd go in and shake the ropes around in the bucket. And then I gave them a good couple rinse rounds. And then I hung them up in the sun. And you'd be surprised just how much your rope will improve just from washing it. Because anyone who's bought hardware store rope, like all of us, it's stiff, it's really twisty because it still has all of its tension and memory in it, and it's full of frays. And once you wash it, you get all the dirt and rocks and grit out of it. So one, your rope's going to last longer, but it's going to start to soften your rope. And you know, you just look how nice and soft this rope looks. It's going to lay nicely. It's going to take knots and bites and whatever you want to do with it so much better. Then after I wash it, you know, hang it up to dry for a while. And once it's thoroughly dry, it's time to oil my ropes. And there's all sorts of different oils you can use. I mean, generally you want to use natural oils. I wouldn't use like motor oil or 3-in-1. But I always have mineral oil in my shop. It's super cheap. It's completely safe to use. And then I will oil my ropes. We'll get into that a little bit later. So what if you're starting out? Well, one thing that you can do is singe your rope. Look at all of these little hairs coming off of the rope. And so here is a rope that I've treated, that I've singed, and here's one typically as you get it from the hardware store. Now tell me which one's going to feel better on your hands, which one's going to work better with knots, which one's going to lay flatter when you're having it do its work, right? It's going to be this one. So how do I go about doing it? Well, it just so happens with the basic lighter. Now, if you have a ton of rope to do, a lighter's going to get too hot and you're going to burn through your fluid really quick. But all you have to do is just burn the little flyaways off, and you'll greatly improve the quality and longevity of your rope. And of course, don't start a fire. Don't do this in your bedroom. Do this outside. Have some ventilation. Have some fire precautions. I'm in my shop. I got everything in arm's reach. And this goes a long, long ways. I've tried other ways. I've heard people use a propane torch or something like that. But this is, to me, I think the easiest method to control. So if you're just going to try it out for the first time, try a lighter. And most of us, if we're doing some form of soldier impression, we're going to have a dog tent. So it's not like we're going to have dozens and dozens of linear feet of rope to have to deal with. So there you go. You just work your way through and you singe off all the flyaways and you have a much better looking rope. Now, these ropes I had on the corner uprights on my dog tent, and I think I did it in the field once, and so I had a bunch of other stuff to do. So I didn't take the time to whip the ends of my rope. Now, whipping is an incredible skill to know how to do, and it also makes your rope last longer and keeps it from falling apart on you. Plus, it also just looks better. This just kind of looks bad, and then if you ever had to take out this knot, well, then you're going to effectively lose this because this has all come unwound. So I think this is a great extreme example of why you want to whip the ends of your rope. So let me get you in close and I'll show you a really simple whip. To do our lashing, all we need is some natural fiber cordage. This stuff isn't particularly thick because this is mostly just about rope management. And you just cut a length of it. Now, if this is your first time, I would recommend cutting longer than you need. It just gives your hands a little bit more to work with. And then you're just going to fold it around into a loop. And this loop will point to the direction that you will be whipping. So we want to go this way. Our loop goes on top of the rope like so. And then we're going to take the long end and we are going to wrap our rope. You want to keep it nice and tight. You want it to look nice. Keep your strings right next to each other. And then I usually do about 5. And then when you're done, you take the end of your string, you go through the loop, and you come back to the bottom, and we're going to pull that loop into the middle of the whipping, and that is what is going to secure it. And then you just take a little bit of time to tug on the ends to clean it up real nice. And there you go. And that will keep your rope looking nice and keep it from fraying. So when I'm done, I like to use a chisel to cut off the end of the rope because you get this really nice finish on it, but scissors work fine too. Cut off your strings, get those out of your way. There we go. Now we have a rope that will no longer fray. Now for a little bit of added holding power and for finish, just take some regular white glue and kind of flood the end of it here and rub it into the fibers, rub it into the whipping, because I'm not going to use this rope for anything other than what I have it assigned to. Now, if you just need a temporary whipping, don't bother gluing it. And I like to use something like Elmer's glue because it dries clear, but whatever glue you have should work. And I'll set that aside to dry, and then I will be all done with finishing the end of that rope. So our rope has been singed, it has been whipped, it has been cleaned, and now it's time to oil. But before I get into oiling, I do want to point something out. So I put eye splices on most of my ropes, especially if they're going to be anchoring something down. Great skill to know how to do. But you'll also see I put a whipping on my eye splices. This doesn't add any strength, but what a whipping here will do, again, this is all light duty stuff, will keep the eye splice laying flat, which is a nice little bit of knowledge to know. This is a simple whipping. There are all sorts of incredibly amazing, heavy duty, and complex whippings that you can do for various applications, but this is a solid one to know how to do. So now we need to oil it, because we want to make sure that our rope is moisturized, flexible, pliable, and ready for use. So I just use mineral oil, and I'll just take a little bit in my hand. You can use a cloth, but my hands get dry reenacting over the weekend, and so this is just a great way to moisturize my hands in the process. So I'll just put a little bit in my hands, and I oil the rope. That's all there is to it. You don't have to saturate your rope. You're essentially wiping your rope in oil, and you just kind of work it in. So you don't want your rope dripping wet with oil. And you can get, if you don't know where to get mineral oil, most grocery stores have it. Every pharmacy has it. It's a nice, handy thing to have around. And if you ever, if you get a spot that just needs a little bit more, you can put some more in your hands. But I noticed that just kind of rubbing down the rope with my oily hands is all that it takes to have nice, pliable rope. And I'll let that hang for a couple of days. And everyone knows how stiff and rigid and how much of a pain fresh out of that tight little roll of hardware store rope can be, that when you care for it, you just get this beautiful, flexible, durable rope that doesn't kink, bind, or just knot up on you all the time. So this will also pack really well, and you have the benefit of learning skills and knowledge that most people in the 19th century would have had. And it's a great way, almost free way, for you to improve your impression at your next event. Thanks as always for liking, commenting, and subscribing. And don't forget to check out our website at secondusss.com, and we'll see you in the next one.